We're back with the right-wing reaction to the Supreme Court's ruling, and folks, we need to keep an eye on this one. The rhetoric is getting flat-out dangerous. Today, Republican Congressman Mike Pence is apologizing after comparing the health care ruling to 9/11. A former spokesman for the Michigan GOP is also apologizing after calling for a, quote, armed rebellion in an email. Republican Congressman Mo Brooks hasn't yet apologized for hinting at revolution. Quote, America's founding fathers fought a rebellion for individual liberty. Today's Supreme Court decision is a heavy boot on the throat of that liberty. And Senator Rand Paul suggested Americans should revolt and said Obamacare should act as a wake-up call. Wake-up calls, rebellions, revolutions. They have to be very careful with their wording. Let's remember the Tea Party movement built to a fury in 2009 and 2010, outraged over the new health care law. We all remember the scenes, and the violence always seemed to bubble just beneath the surface. At one point after the law passed, 10 House Democrats reported receiving threats or acts of violence against them. Joining me now is a congressman who saw that violence of the Tea Party firsthand, former Congressman Thomas Perriello of Virginia. We'll get into his experience taking on the Tea Party in a moment. We're also joined by Joe Madison, nationally syndicated radio host of Mornings with Madison. Thanks to both of you for joining.
Thank you, Reverend. Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Let me go to you first, Congressman. Are you surprised at the level of anger from Republicans, including all this talk from elected officials of revolution?
Nothing surprises me anymore after what we've been through the last few years. But it's one thing to have that rhetoric coming from across the country. It's another for leaders not to understand the importance of the signal that they send. When you start using a language that something is somehow illegitimate, that helps send a signal that illegitimate means of response may be legitimate because of it. And so I think it's so important that our leaders and elected officials show respect for the rule of law, respect for the fact that a very conservative Supreme Court has upheld this bill, and send a signal that the appropriate way to handle policy disagreements is through public debate in our elections.
Now, Politico had a headline saying Tom Perriello gas line intentionally cut. Tell us what happened to you after you voted for the law and you faced some stiff Tea Party opposition.
You know, it was a very scary time for a lot of us, and there was a Tea Party member who posted something saying it's time to take the fight to Tom's house, and unfortunately put my brother's address, my brother who has small children, and the next night he came home to find that his gas line was cut and his back porch was full of gas. FBI still hasn't solved it. We've obviously seen other acts of violence at other periods in our history. We're obviously very blessed that everyone walked away in our case okay. But I think what was significant about that was how slow elected leaders in the Republican Party were to respond in a serious way. You saw in some ways the state Republicans in Virginia respond much more quickly than the congressional Republicans. So, you know, we have to take this seriously, and we have to understand how important it is to have civil debate. I do feel like we're in a much more civil place than we were 2 years ago. I think the fact that the Supreme Court has shown the legitimacy of what we did. It's a political process to decide if it's good policy. I think it is. It's the court's job to be the final arbiter of whether it's constitutional. But, you know, you have a lot of folks out there who are upset because, frankly, they've never liked the Constitution that much. They always like the Articles of Confederation better than the Constitution.
No doubt
and
about
that's a disagreement that's gone on for 230 years in this country.
Joe, on the civil rights side, we've had to become very clear that we're against violence and to try to keep things down. Do the leadership in the Republican Party and the right wing, or those that have dealings with these kind of Tea Party types, have a responsibility to set a tone and denounce anything like the congressman just talked about he went through?
Absolutely, just like we have, too. How many demonstrations have we participated in when we have kept that tone calm? We just did it in Sanford. Matter of fact, you just showed a rally. I remember Ben Gleck's rally, and we had thousands, tens of thousands of folks who showed up. And if you remember, it was an extremely peaceful demonstration, and we were in opposition. But, you know, what's also interesting, it's what they're not saying. All of this debate, since this debate has been going on, Reverend Sharpton, President Obama has been a communist, a Marxist, and a socialist. I still don't know how you can be all three at the same time. But isn't it interesting that now they have to include who? Conservative, jurists, Justice Supreme Court Roberts? Is he now a socialist, a communist? Does he now hang in effigy?
Well, Joe, it even gets worse. According to Michael Savage, he claims Roberts upheld Obamacare because of cognitive problems due to epilepsy medication. Listen to this.
Neurologists will tell you that medication used for seizure disorders, such as epilepsy, can introduce mental slowing, forgetfulness, and other cognitive problems. And if you look at Roberts' writings, you can see the cognitive dissociation in what he is saying.
So you've got the president, a communist, a socialist, but now you have cognitive problems for the Supreme Court justice because he voted for upholding the constitutionality of health care.
Let me add one other thing. We also, and I know your staff will find this because they're very good at this, Rush Limbaugh saying that if this becomes law, that he would in fact move to Costa Rica. And I tell you, I will buy his ticket, and I guess I'll buy the Viagra to go with it. But he can leave. All of them had all this big talk going on. So keep his word. Go to Costa Rica.
Congressman, I'm going to let you come in. I'm not going to get into the latter part of what Mr. Madison will buy him. The ticket is sufficient. But, Congressman, you want to weigh in the civility of this?
I did. You know, another disturbing event last week, there's a group of Catholic nuns going around the country trying to raise awareness of the issue of poverty. They've gotten tremendous spiritual support across religious lines, been very critical of Paul Ryan's budget, but mainly raising the issue of poverty. And there was a right-wing talk show host who said they needed to be taken off the bus and pistol whipped, and a Republican congressman laughed when this came up. And I think what we remember is we obviously have to call this out, but we also have to be inspired by the fact that the nuns have kept going. They've continued to be a prophetic voice against poverty. Healthcare reform proceeded. We are finally going to have universal affordable healthcare in this country. So it's very important that we call out these dangerous things when they're said, but that we also take inspiration in a week like this about great victories when people have the courage to face up against injustice and fight for a better world.
And I think we also should thank you for voting, because you've been vindicated. You did the right thing. You can put your head down at night and you can tell your children and your family. It might have cost you, but it was a battle worth fighting. And we ought to also thank all those other congressmen that fought and were drummed out.
Former Congressman Thomas Perriello and Joe Madison, thank you both, and have a great weekend. And I hope we can deal with this without being ugly on either side. It is unnecessary, it's unproductive, and it could lead to more problems than solutions. Still ahead, from FDR to LBJ to Barack Obama, we'll look at the right's long, sordid history of attacking our greatest social programs. They were wrong then, and they're wrong now.